I just say thank you for coming out on this very windy night. I hope you all didn't suffer too much with any wind damage anywhere. Item 1 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Do any members have any personal or prejudicial interest to declare?
Mr Mayor, I have a prejudicial interest in item 11.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Buckley.
I have the same prejudicial interest in item 11.
Mr Mayor, I have the same.
Thank you. Councillor Nash.
As I do, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. Agenda item 2, confirmation of minutes. I note that Councillor Gill has indicated to the monitoring officer within the specified time frame that he has a challenge regarding the accuracy of the minutes. Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Mayor. Unfortunately, due to the current process as to how the minutes are published, I find myself having to propose an amendment to the last council minutes of the 14th of October. This is due to an omission of pertinent statement made by Councillor Buckley in answer to my written question to the council. The reason that it's pertinent is twofold. Firstly, it is the actual answer to the question I asked and not the supplementary words used to explain related issues to the question. Secondly, that my supplementary question, which has to relate to the answer given to my first question, as per the Constitution, Part 4, Paragraph 9.5, is directly attributable to the omission. Council must agree that it is imperative that constituents have full sight of members' questions and Council's answers. They cannot be expected to rely on debriefs from members, nor on the video recording. This reporting media is not defined in the Constitution and may not even be available, as sometimes happens. I note the omission of Councillor Hayhurst's summing up at the same meeting. I therefore propose a motion to add the following verbatim statement from Councillor Buckley to the minutes inserted after across the borough. Further plans for improvement, including budget requirements, will be brought to the Tourist and Leisure Committee. Thank you.
Does anybody wish to speak? And in doing so, can I remind members that your comments should be limited to the accuracy of the minutes in accordance with Procedure Rule 15. Yes, Councillor Singleton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This question regarding minutes was brought up by Councillor Gill after a recent Audit and Standards meeting, and I did refer Councillor Gill to the government website, gov.uk, in which it refers to minutes, and minutes not being verbatim but notes only. That was my answer to Councillor Gill, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on this debate? Right, okay, well, we'll go to the vote then. All right. It is proposed that Councillor Gill's amendment to the minutes is, what's the word? Gone.
All those in favour of the
amendment. All right, all those in favour of the amendment, please put your hands up. Okay. Thank you. Right, thank you. All those against, please raise your hands. Right, that is clearly lost. I will propose from the Chair that the minutes of the meetings held on the 14th of October 2019 be confirmed as a correct record. All those in favour, please show.
And I would like to second that. I think we need to do that.
Right, Councillor.
I would like to second that.
Your moment of glory. Right. Right, all those in favour? Thank you, that is clearly carried. Item 3, Mayor's announcements. I would like to thank everyone for the invites that I've had over the last few months, all been enjoyable in all their different guises. And it's nice to see so many people and see the wonderful things that they do for this community by whatever they do, whether it's fundraising for good causes, or as we had at the town hall the other week, some people will do anything for a cup of tea and a bun, and that was the wonderful groups that clean the beaches and litter pick. I don't know about the Monday group today, whether they were out or not, because I think it might have been too big a high tide for them, or they could have got blown away. But to everybody who does anything to make this borough a wonderful place, they are to be congratulated. The other announcements I have are future fundraising events that are coming up shortly. And the first one is I'm having a coffee morning this Friday, the 14th of February, because I love you all, you see, that's why I've chosen that day, at 10 till 12 here at the Town Hall. On the 13th of March, I'm holding a race night at the Monterey Beach Hotel, and that will be £10 including a hot pot supper. The Mayor's Ball on the 20th of March, which is at Ribby Hall. April the 1st, it's My Life Through Flowers by Sheila Redcliffe. So if you want to dig the dirt on Richard, come and see what Sheila has to say. And that's at 7 p.m. at the Town Hall here. And on May the 1st, Richard's very kindly organising a musical mayhem at St Paul's Church at Annul. So it will be showcasing local talent. I don't know whether Richard's doing any musical things, but would pay him to stay away, I think, from that. Okay. So your support at all or any of these events would be much appreciated. And also, if you can spread the word, thank you. That's all my announcements. Chief Executive, do you have any communications to report?
I have none this evening, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Right, item 5. Questions from members of the council. Sorry, questions from members of the council. Got it right. 2 questions have been received from members of the council on this occasion. The first question has been received from Councillor Brian Gill, and I would like to invite Councillor Gill to read out his question and remind him that 1 supplementary question is permitted, provided it is related to the response given to the initial question. Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if Council is aware, but over recent years, the development and upkeep of Lytham has seen some worrying trends. As a layman, it would appear that the Planning Committee has a policy for developing industrial-looking and overbearing buildings in Lytham. I cite 3 examples to my knowledge. On Balham Road, next to the old coach house, and on Eiley Road. This is happening whilst heritage buildings like Lytham Institute are not being maintained. Council officers have even had to instruct a private company to conduct a structural survey on the building due to its lack of care, only £57,000 in the last 10 years. Can the Council reassure the Lytham community that the trend of building these types of buildings is not a policy, that it supports the continuing upkeep of the way Lytham is seen, which is an example of Victorian splendour, and explain why some of the £400,000 of the Lytham Regeneration Fund is not allocated in bringing the Institute back to its former glory, overcoming the distinct lack of investment by the Council over recent years.
Thank you. Councillor Fiddler, I understand you are going to respond to this question.
Thank you for that. I hope again. Mr. Mayor, true to form, the question embodies 2 criticisms. Criticisms on a planning committee which, in Councillor Gill's view, has a policy of developing industrial-looking and overbearing buildings in Lytham. To prove his point, he cites 3 examples, whilst at the same time, he says heritage buildings like the Lytham Institute are not maintained due to Council's reluctance to direct Section 106 and regeneration funds towards their upkeep. Mr Mayor, in response, I have to ask, is there any substance in Councillor Gill's criticism of the Planning Committee? And I make reference to his three examples. First, Balham Road. The Planning Committee tried to protect an existing 1930s Art Deco house from being demolished and to be replaced by a modern flat development. Permission by the committee was refused, only for it to be overturned on appeal. The development referred to in Church Drive, an area characterised by a wide range of properties, was of very modern design. Approval was a consequence of guidance in the National Planning Policy Framework, which directs planning authorities not to stifle innovation. And I repeat, not to stifle innovation in design. And finally, and more interestingly, Isley Road. Prior to May's election, a neighbour of Councillor Gill applied for a replacement dwelling. This application led to a barrage of objection from Brian Gill. If his objections had been rehearsed after becoming a councillor, he would have been advised of his prejudicial interest. Against this background, I question Councillor Gill's understanding of planning, and in my opinion, there is no substance to his criticism. In answer to his question regarding Lytham Institute, the recent structural survey that he mentioned was necessary to assess the cost of alternative uses of the premises after the Lancashire County Council had relocated the library. I remind Council that there are 130k Section 106 monies allocated to the Lytham Town Centre regeneration programme. These funds are ring-fenced and cannot be used to finance any work on the Institute. In addition, the Council has agreed 670k of funding to improve and refresh the town's public realm. Any monies redirected to the Institute would mean that there would be less funds available to address the wider town centre issues. Mr Mayor, thank you.
Councillor Gill, do you have a supplementary question?
I do. Thank you for Councillor Fiegler for that response, one that I expected. And with regard to the comments around planning, I think I'm a little bit more savvy, having taken some of your guidance within the planning committee, so I thank you for that. However, my question refers to the second part, really, which is about the funding. The council have taken some in the order of £256,000 from Lancashire County Council over the last 10 years, which was supposed to be for the maintenance of the Lytham Institute, and they've only provided £57,000 over that 10-year period. I would like to understand where the council is going to access the monies to actually bring Lytham Institute back into its former glory.
Councillor Fiedler.
In reply to the question, I think it would be premature at this stage. Things around the Institute are moving very quickly. It's just acquired the charity status with the council as the sole trustee. We don't know the ramifications or any discussions around the significance of that. And I think your question will be more pertinent once the dust has settled and we appreciate just what being the sole trustee will be.
Thank you. The second question has been received from Councillor Roger Lloyd. I would like to invite Councillor Lloyd to read out his question and remind him that one supplementary question is permitted, provided it is related to the response given to the initial question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to stand there so this, I think. Lytham Institute has recently been registered as a charity, with Fylde Borough Council as a sole trustee. There was widespread community concern in Lytham at the closure of the library, including, as we all know, a great deal of public mistrust at the apparent lack of openness and transparency at the time. We as councillors can help change that public perception. This transparency is what local people expect and need. It will be helpful if we as councillors ensure the future decisions of the Institute will only be considered at council or committee level. Similar, I believe, as to how the Planning Committee operates today. So I ask the Council, in the spirit of this transparency, that councillors should urgently consider introducing a process to temporarily suspend the delegation of decision-making over the Institute to officers, at least until the process to conclude a new governance document is completed. This would not prevent officers from preparing reports and giving advice to members. The temporary suspension would demonstrate the Council's intention to deal openly with the Institute. It is this very openness and transparency that is needed to gain the support of the community again in Lytham. Therefore, I would ask that a separate meeting of the full Council be held to determine how the Council should proceed with the Institute in its new charitable role. Its role should include gathering of the evidence needed to inform the Council's future debates regarding the Institute, considering and identifying the circumstances that make it necessary to alter the present purposes of the Institute, ensuring that the Council meet the criteria for making a scheme, and finally, considering what similar purposes that the charity and property should have in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Buckley, I presume you're responding to the question.
Yes, Mr Mayor, thank you. The closure of Lytham Library at Lytham Institute was a deliberate act by a Labour-controlled Lancashire County Council, whose decision in 2016 led to more than a third of the county's libraries being closed. Let's not forget that this decision in the budget meeting of February 2016 had the support of Fylde's independents for the vote to be carried. The return of a library to Lytham by the Conservatives at LCC is to be welcomed, and I hope Councillor Lloyd will acknowledge this achievement. I agree with him about the importance of decision-making being open and transparent, and yet I don't share the sentiment behind his question, which suggests that decisions relating to the Institute will not meet this standard. The Joint Charity Commission and Local Government Association guidance, entitled Councillor's Guide to a Council's Role as Charity Trustee, states, where a local authority is a trustee of a charity, it is the corporate body, acting in accordance with its usual procedures, which is the trustee. While ongoing management can be delegated to officers, responsibility for decision-making and oversight rests with councillors. Further, in accordance with the Charity Commission's operational guidance at OG 56B1, paragraph 4.1 states, it is up to the local authority to decide, within the scope of local government law, what structures should be used to reach decisions in its name as trustee. An alternative to requiring all the decisions to be reached by the full body of councillors, for example, is to set up a separate committee to discharge its responsibilities as trustee. A report on the Institute was brought to Finance and Democracy Committee on the 22nd of July last year, and a decision was made to register the Lytham Institute as a charitable trust, and then seek immediate advice and discussion with the Charity Commission on the governance and future management of the Trust, and open discussions with community groups and interested stakeholders to determine the most effective use of the Institute to fulfil the required objectives of the Trust. Following the implementation of the first of those decisions, a further report was published last week for the next Finance and Democracy meeting on the 17th of February that outlines the process for updating the purpose of the Trust and making an administrative scheme. Councillors will make a decision on consideration of that report. Councillor Lloyd can be reassured that the Council, acting in its role as a trustee, is demonstrating that it will follow guidance from the Charity Commission and will make decisions through its usual procedures by councillors. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Butley. Councillor Lloyd, do you have a supplementary question?
Sort of, yes.
Yes or no?
Yes. Yes. My question was, in the first place, was that there should be a separate meeting of the full council. And I don't think Councillor Buckley answered that question.
Is that your question?
And also to remind everybody that the Lytham Institute has been a community centre for 150 years. And I just thought I'd tell everybody that, you know.
Right, thank you. Councillor Butley, do you reply to that question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just refer to the answer that I've given in stating that the committee the report will go before the Committee of the Finance and Democracy Committee. That is within the Charity Commission's guidance for decisions to be made by full council or by committee using its usual procedures. Usual procedures have been used in this case, and that the report will go to the next F&D, which is next Monday. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Butley. Item 6 on the agenda, questions from members of the public, and there are no questions tonight. Thank you. Agenda item 7, notice of motion, definition of anti-Semitism, and it's received from Councillor Susan Fazackley, and I would like to invite Councillor Fazackley to table the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Notice that I say Mr Mayor and not just Mayor, correct form. Mr Mayor, fellow councillors, local authority leaders have recently received a letter from Robert Jenrick, the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, urging our authorities to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism. The government is committed to combating anti-Semitism in all its forms, wherever it arises, and I quote the Minister, recognises the incredibly valuable role local authorities have to play in tackling all forms of hate crime, in partnership with local police forces. The government needs local authorities to show leadership, along with our civil partners in society and community activists. This definition is already used in guidance for the Police and Crown Prosecution Service. The Minister continues, your work to build resilience and integration locally helps to challenge some of the factors that may cause hate crime, preventing prejudice and hatred from taking root. Adopting this definition shows a firm intention on this Council's part to reassure our Jewish community that we are aware of their concerns, particularly in light of the rise in religiously motivated hate crimes across Europe, in America, and also, most worryingly, in Britain, and pledge our support to them. The Prime Minister recently said that he felt a deep sense of shame at the resurgence of the virus of anti-Semitism in Britain, and pledged to do everything he could to stamp it out. Mr Mayor, I am writing this introduction to the notice of motion on January the 27th, the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. The old newsreels on our TV screens have highlighted the vile and horrific acts committed against Jewish people, some of whom are still alive to tell the tale. Mr Mayor, fellow councillors, we must act swiftly and with utter conviction to play our part in preventing further manifestations of this most evil of philosophies. And so I would urge unanimous support for the notice of motion that I am proposing this evening. My notice of motion is that Filed Council adopts the International Holocaust Anti-Semitism Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism, which is that anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. I move this notice of motion, Mr. Mayor, and I have a seconder in Councillor Michelle Morris.
Thank you, Councillor Fazackley. Councillor Morris?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second this motion and wish to reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Have we got anybody who wishes to speak on this motion? No? Right, we'll go straight to... Sorry, Michelle.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to thank the leader for proposing this motion and for highlighting the issue in the chamber tonight. This issue has sadly been brought to the forefront more than ever with last year's general election and Labour's party's inadequacy and reluctance to deal with the issue of anti-Semitism within its own party. Having now been part of the St Anne's community for nearly 7 years, I've been fortunate to have been aware of only 3 anti-Semitic incidents that have taken place here over this time. But Mr. Mayor, this is 3 too many. Nationally, the CST, the Jewish Community Security Trust, a charity set up solely to protect the Jewish community of the UK, last year recorded 1,805 anti-Semitic incidents here in the UK, the highest total ever recorded in a single calendar year, and which is 7% higher than 2018, making it the 4th consecutive year in which the annual record has been broken. As well as physical attacks, damage to property and cemeteries, and verbal abuse, social media has become an often anonymous free-for-all. The Jewish community is fortunate that this Conservative government recognises the need for protection outside our places of worship and funds every synagogue in the country to employ a security guard. Here in St Anne's is no different, and one lady came up to ask me recently when I was carrying out a voluntary security rota outside the synagogue to ask me why we have a security guard and how sad it is that in sleepy St Anne's we feel the need to have security. The fact that we are a small town highlights the need even more to need such security. At Holocaust memorial services across the country last month, we often quote Niemöller, who was born in Lippstadt in Germany in 1892 and who was a cadet in the German Navy in the First World War. By the Second World War, although he initially welcomed the Third Reich, his turning point was when he realised that his phone had been tapped by the Gestapo did he oppose the Nazi regime. He famously wrote, "First they came for the socialists and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me." I am pleased that members of this council this evening are prepared to speak out and be counted in this chamber and hope that all members will support this motion and by doing so will send a strong message to those out there who perpetrate these wicked acts of hatred. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Councillor Rhodes, you indicated you wished to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I absolutely support this notice of motion and I would never ever understand anybody who couldn't. I think that we've all got to stamp out racism of any kind and any religious hatred. I truly believe that. But I'm really finding it regrettable that Councillor Morris thought to bring politics into it, and I think it's really, really regrettable that she's done that. This is far too important an issue to politicise, and I do feel that we should leave politics out of things like this.
I think everything that needs to be said has been said, Mr. Mayor, so I would like to propose a motion.
Item 8 on the agenda, invitation to accept the appointment of Deputy Mayor. So I invite Councillor Cheryl Little to introduce the next item. Councillor Little.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I stand to propose Councillor Roger Small as Deputy Mayor for the next municipal year, and I have a seconder in Councillor Tommy Threlfall. Thank you.
Councillor Threlfall. Is there anybody who wishes to speak on this proposal? No. Right, we'll go to a vote then. All those in favour, please show. Right, that's unanimous, thank you. Sorry, I missed that bit about the debate. Put it right at the bottom. Right, item 9 on the agenda, schedule of meetings for 2020 and 2021. I invite Councillor Susan Fazakerley to introduce the next item. Councillor Fazakerley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to propose the approval of the proposed council and committee dates for the forthcoming municipal year, and I have a seconder in Councillor Buckley. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I second the proposal. Thank you.
Have we got anybody who wishes to speak on this proposal? Right, then we'll go to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Right, thank you. That's unanimous. I would like to invite Councillor Karen Butley to introduce this item.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I ask Council to approve the Pay Policy Statement 2020. It's on page 13 and in Appendix 1 to the report with the required statement on gender pay gap information. The requirement for all local authorities to have a pay policy statement has been in since 2012 as part of the Localism Act, and a more recent requirement to include the gender pay gap information was required from 2017 for all employers who employ more than 250 staff. So this is an annual requirement of this council, Mr. Mayor, and I ask that council approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Settle, I understand you're going to second this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to second this proposal.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak on this proposal? Right, we'll go to the vote then. All in favour, please show. Unanimous. Item 11 on the agenda is the Council Tax Reduction Scheme of 2020-21, and I would like to invite Councillor Settle to introduce this item. So we just wait for him. Yes, thank you. Just while those who said they wanted to leave. All right, thank you, Councillor Settle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In April 2013, the Government introduced the Council Tax Reduction Scheme to provide financial assistance to qualifying households to assist them with their council tax payment. The scheme currently allows for a maximum 22.7% reduction. Since its introduction, this council has always paid the maximum discount, and I am pleased to see that for this forthcoming year, the recommendation is that we continue to offer this maximum amount. Additionally, the second recommendation is that we continue to operate the discretionary hardship scheme for claimants in exceptional circumstances. And finally, the third recommendation is to prove the financial implications on the Council's revenue budget. I propose that we accept all three recommendations and have a seconder in Councillor Small.
Thank you. Councillor Small.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm standing to second those three recommendations. May I just say beforehand, though, briefly, thank you to those people who saw fit to vote on item 8. So thank you very much from people around the chamber. I'm just standing. It's a well-established scheme, this one. It's been in operation a number of years, actually. I'm pleased that we do offer the maximum discount that we're able to do so, and I believe it has widespread support amongst the council chamber, so I'm happy to second it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak on this proposal? No? Right, thank you. We'll go to the vote then. All those in favour, please show. Right. Item 12 on the agenda is the council tax premium of 2020 to 21 and 2021 to 22. I would like to invite Councillor Viv Wilder to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You'll have to excuse me, I've got a croak, so I'll do my best. Just to give you a little update, in 2013, the government introduced legislation allowing the local authorities discretion to charge an additional 50% premium to the owners of empty and unfurnished properties over 2 years. The council introduced this additional charge from the 1st of April 2014. In 2018, we had further increase to the premium to 100% on properties left empty and unfurnished again for over 2 years, with effect from April 2019. Now that was twice the normal charge. But that also provided further discretionary premium levels of the first one, 200%, I wish it was, 200%, which is 300%, 3 times the normal charge in respect of empty properties for over 5 years, effective from April 2020. And the second one is 300%, which is 400%, 4 times the normal charge in respect of empty properties left empty for over 10 years, and that's effective from April 2021. Just a little bit of data shows that there were over 50 properties within filed that have remained unoccupied for over 5 years and 20 properties for over 10 years. Now these premiums provide a strong incentive to owners to bring their properties back into use, and any increase in the normal council tax charge may encourage those owners who haven't already done so to take action as soon as possible. Just to give you a little bit of update, empty properties have since we brought in the original premium of the increased council tax, it reduced from 710 properties in 2013 to 512 in 2019. is 198 properties that have been seen to. So therefore, I'm asking the Council to recommend that from the 1st of April this year, 2020, a premium of 200% for empty properties over 5 years, and from the 1st of April next year, 2021, a premium of 300% for empty properties of over 10 years. And I do have a seconder in Councillor Settle. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Settle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to second this proposal.
Have we anybody who wishes to speak on this proposal? Right, we'll go to the vote then. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against? Right, it's carried. Thank you. Item 13, financial forecast update for 2019-20 to 2023-24. I would like to invite Councillor Karen Butley to introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I present the updated financial forecast, which can be found on page 36 of the agenda papers. This report has been to Finance and Democracy Committee on the 27th of January, where it was noted, and the same report comes now to full council this evening for approval. The format is familiar to members. And the forecast has been updated to reflect the impact of the 2020-21 local government finance settlement, which was announced on the 20th of December last year, and the key points of which are set out in the report. Other budget adjustments, including the approved continuation of the distribution of new homes bonus to town and parish councils, are also within the report, with the present position reflected at Appendix E on page 52. The forecast represents a healthy financial position for Fylde for the present year and next year, with estimates of a surplus, but thereafter a draw on reserves. Our Director of Finance at paragraph 4.4 in the report states that the finances of the Council remain robust. I am pleased to propose the report for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Settler, I understand you will second this proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Me again. I'm very happy to second this proposal.
Thank you. Have we got anybody who wishes to speak on this proposal? No? Okay, thank you. We will go to the vote then. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? 2 abstentions. That's clearly carried. Thank you. Item 14 on the agenda is the mid-year Prudential Indicators and Treasury Management Monitoring Report for 2019-20. I would like to invite Councillor John Singleton to introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I present this report every year to Council, providing members with a summary report of the Treasury management based on the mid-year review period as of the 30th of September. I'll just give you a brief review. Page 54 is an overview of this report. It covers the economic background and the outlook position. The report also provides the latest projected interest rates, forecast, and the external debt position of the Council. Page 55 and 56, at the end of the cut-off period, the Council had £28.9 million of investments, the majority of investments in local authority loans, of which none were in place for more than the recommended time of 12 months. Other investments in bank and money markets are with organisations with an A classification rating. The income from investments have been higher than the forecast, with higher cash balances. This income budget has been reviewed and increased from 91.5 thousand to 182,000. On page 56, that the SIPFA has revised the Treasury Management Code and introduced this year for the first time Treasury investments, which covers such items as properties. The Council held £3.2 million of non-Treasury investments, which netted £227,000. Page 57, paragraph 6, the Audit and Standards Committee received this report in October and recommended approval at the next full Council meeting, which is this evening. Page 58 is a glossary of the terms kindly supplied by the finance team, and page 59 covers the frequently asked questions. Just looking quickly at the tables, looking at Appendix B and Table 61, this forecast capital expenditure. This has increased from £12 million to £17.5 million, largely due to rephasing a number of schemes, 16 in all, with the main areas being Fairhaven scheme of 2.3 and the M55 link of 1 million. It also covers new schemes approved by the Council in March of this year. Table 2 covers the capital financing requirement, and this figure of £5.9 million has not changed. This is normally the amount the Council would have to fund by external borrowing. The Council will continue to use internal borrowing, cash flow, as an alternative. Table 3, Mr Mayor, covers the gross debt and CFR, and this shows the estimated position at the end of the financial year, with no long-term borrowing, as the last £1 million was repaid on the 16th of December 2019. And the CFR remaining at £5.9 million, there are no difficulties anticipated in keeping the long-term capital borrowing below the CFR. Turning to page 62 on Table 4, looking at the authorised limit, the original indicator of £9 million. This consisted of £2 million we originally planned to borrow at the March budget meeting, £6 million, which was a contingency made by this Council, and should the Council be unable to collect any taxes by way of the system going down, or any event that the Council were unable to obtain council tax. And the £1 million external debt to the Public Works Loan Board. The revised amount is £7 million, as we will not need to borrow the £2 million, plus we still have the £6 million contingency. And at the September cut-off period, we still had the £1 million external debt. The operational boundary is also reduced at the year-end position by not using the planned £2 million borrowing. That left us £1 million. Yes. Table 5 shows the Treasury position at from 11 million to 19.2 million, reflects the forecasting of daily cash flows. Page 63 on Table 6 shows the financing cost of the net revenue system, and Table 7 shows the investments over 1 year period. Just like to confirm there are none compared with the 5 million estimated value. And finally, on page 64, you'll find that on Appendix C shows the investments and external debt position. The external borrowing was £1 million at a rate of 3.9%. That is now zero. And the short-term investments, the three categories as they are shown. Can I just say, Mr Mayor, that it's another good mid-year report of the Prudential Indicators. All the external borrowing has reduced, originally 3.8 million in 2014 to zero at the end of 2019. Investments and cash balances have increased, and there is no planned external borrowing, certainly for the remainder of this financial year. There are few councils, Mr Mayor, that are in this envious position. It's not luck, I think it's good management. On behalf of the council, I would like to record our thanks to the finance team for these splendid Treasury management indicators. Mr Mayor, I recommend these prudential indicators and the investments limits and the report to be approved by full council, and I have a seconder in Councillor Nash, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singleton. Councillor Nash.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I second and reserve the right.
Thank you. Have we anybody who wishes to speak on this proposal? No, we'll go straight to the vote then. All those in favour, please show. It's unanimous. Thank you. Transportation Liaison Group. And I'd like to invite Councillor Trevor Fiddler to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think the report before Council this evening is rather simple and straightforward, and I stand to make the two recommendations. One, to approve the recommendation of the Planning Committee that the Highways and Transportation Liaison Group be added to the approved list of outside bodies for Fylde Council. And secondly, to approve the nomination of Councillors Dixon, Owes and Prudential as recommended by the Planning Committee to represent the Council on the Highways and Transportation Liaison Group. I so move, and I do have a second in the Councillor Richard Radcliffe.
Thank you, Councillor Fiddler. Councillor Radcliffe.
And I would like to second those recommendations.
All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Yes. Right. Item 16, Corporate Plan 2020 to 2024. The final item is an information item about the corporate plan that will be for discussion and decision at a future council meeting. The draft corporate plan included in your papers has been circulated to all committees, and it is before council tonight to remind members that if there is any feedback, to contact Alex Scrivens with your comments by the closing date of February the 17th. Thank you.
Please be upstanding.
That was painless.
Can I just say thank you for your attendance, and I hope you all have a very safe journey home.